In this video, I'm going to explain what archetypes are and how you can use them to improve your life. And even if you already know something about Jungian archetypes, you'll probably still learn something. So strap in. Hey guys, welcome to Mastermind Content. Today I'm going to explain what archetypes are, and what I have to tell you may be a little bit different than what you already know. So the reason I say this is because archetypes seem to have been wheedled down to personality types, and whilst that's not wrong, most people tend to box them into categories and say, ooh, which archetype are you? Well, the reality is that your entire personality is comprised of all of the archetypes, and they show up as subtle energies, essentially as your thoughts, emotions, and actions. They're all archetypal qualities. Now, these energies influence your life either consciously or unconsciously. And because many of these archetypal energies are not known to the conscious mind, because they're not identified by the ego, they cause problems in your life. The reason they cause problems is to teach you a lesson. So let me tell you a bit more about why this is. First of all, let's talk about Carl Jung, one of the proponents of archetypes and arguably one of the most influential figures on the subject. Now, Jung noted that the energy of an archetype communicates itself to the ego only when the latter has been influenced or gripped by an autonomous action of the archetype. It is a psychological fact that an archetype can seize hold of the ego and even compel it to act as it, the archetype, wills. In other words, archetypal energies project from the unconscious onto the conscious mind. They can take possession of the ego, and sometimes the ego will identify with that archetype, especially if it's provided some kind of comfort or desire or relief. The ego will not acknowledge that archetypal quality as a coping mechanism and identify with it. Other times, this unconscious energy will lurch forward, take possession of the ego, and you'll have a moment of madness. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about the ego and how subconscious programs are created in this video, but I have written about this in several articles actually. One of them is on the website called Consciousness Explained, Conscious Awareness, Subconscious and Superconscious. You'll find that on my website in the link below. That basically explains how Mastermind Content established what is the conscious mind, what is the subconscious, and what is the superconscious. But in brief, the ego's role is to handle the drama of the external world. Thus, it navigates us through life. It helps us to navigate through life. But in order to do that, the ego relies on archetypal energies to give us the information that we need to cope with the world. Now, Jung described archetypes essentially as patterns of behaviour that are common to all humankind, and he postulated that the archetypes belong to the collective unconscious, which influence our lives without us realising it, but they are energies that are accessible by everyone, by the entire human race. Some dictionaries also provide the same meaning, in that archetypes are patterns or copies of an original prototype. So if you think of archetypes as a full spectrum of energy, of thoughts, emotions and actions that are available to each of us, it's easier to determine which archetype is influencing your life at any given moment, because thoughts, actions and emotions are essentially energies which are produced in specific moments for specific reasons in reaction to our environment. More to the point, if we all have access to the same spectrum of energies, Why can we sometimes do things that other people can't and vice versa? Why are we not able to adopt the same attitudes and beliefs, for example? Well, that's because certain events happen in our lives that cut us off from accessing parts of our personality. It cuts us off from consciousness, essentially. It's known as repressed emotions, but it's actually repressed consciousness, because our beliefs about ourselves and our attitudes towards life also get repressed within these archetypal energies. It just so happens that we just can't access that information to give to the ego, so that it enables us to act appropriately in appropriate moments. So, for example, let's say, well, we all have an idea of what love is, right? But some people don't know how to be loved. They're just not comfortable receiving praise or adoration or compliments or affection. But if being loved is a trait that everyone has access to, why can't some people feel like they can be loved? Well, that's because the archetypal energy that is programmed in the subconscious does not have the information which instructs the ego to accept love. Essentially, the fragments of our personalities pursue their own goals, which are determined by the information stored within that archetypal energy. So remember that a thought is an energy. Thoughts trigger emotions. Emotions prompt behaviours. So back to Jung. The Swiss noted that instincts are not vague and indefinite by nature, but are specifically formed motives, forces which, long before there is any consciousness and in spite of any degree of consciousness later on, pursue inherent goals. Consequently, they form very close analogies to the archetypes, so close, in fact, that there is good reason for supposing that the archetypes are the unconscious image of the instincts themselves. In other words, that they are patterns of instinctual behavior. So if you have the capacity to integrate unconscious content into the conscious mind, you allow all the archetypes to express themselves in the most appropriate way for the most appropriate moment. They become into conscious awareness. And this is how we basically turn up as the best version of ourselves. The problem is that the ego can deny access to an archetypal quality that it doesn't identify with, even when that particular quality would serve as better than the existing subconscious program. So here's the kicker: if your subconscious programs are grounded in fear, you're going to react from a basis of fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, deceit, manipulation, selfishness, ruthlessness, self-righteousness, unreasonableness, and many others. So to finish off, I just want to give you this quote by the Greek philosopher Plato, because Plato, centuries ago, recognized that we are influenced by archetypes, but he called them forms of humanity. And he wrote, in the knowledgeable realm, that's the conscious mind, the form of the good is the last thing to be seen, and it is reached only with difficulty. Once one has seen it, however, one must include that it is the cause of all that is correct and beautiful in anything, that it produces both light and its source in the visible realm. That's the external world. And that in the intelligible realm it controls and provides truth and understanding, so that anyone who is to act sensibly in private or public must see it. So ultimately, archetypal energies are thoughts, emotions, and actions that define our personality. Thus, the entire archetypal range of energies is what we project into the world, but only when we have access to them. When we don't have access to them, they will project themselves onto the ego and can run riot. So you'll probably find that you have 2 or 3 dominant archetypes that show up quite regularly and quite strongly, but essentially you have access to all the qualities within each of the 12 archetypes. So if you want to show up as your best version for the rest of your life, learn to recognize how your archetypes are showing up, how they're causing problems, and what lessons you can learn from those instincts. Now, I'm going to be covering an entire series of archetypes here on YouTube and on Rumble, and you will find other content on the Mastermind Content website. So subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and follow us on social media. The links are in the description below, and I shall see you soon. Bye bye.